Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to see so many people stuck around this late into the afternoon, and hopefully we're not the only thing between you guys and cocktails, and if we are, sorry. And thank you, Stephanie, for having me on this panel. Yeah, you know, I think, obviously all sorts of stuff, and we're going to get into it today, but I think the very first thing that I find when I'm sitting in a boardroom where I can see that we're, you know, in some sort of even the early stages of liquidity crisis, or I feel like I can see a restructuring on the horizon because I do a whole bunch of this stuff, is most directors in that boardroom, and as advisors you should know this, are in denial. Most folks that serve on boards of directors haven't been through a liquidity crisis. They haven't been through a restructuring. And so the very first and most important consideration that has to be talked about in the boardroom is, yes, this is truly where it looks like we're heading, or at least we need to understand that this might be where we're heading, and we need to address all of the considerations that might come up in this context, because a lot of directors are, you know, most of them are former operators, and they truly want to see the company whose board they're sitting on succeed. They don't want to have served on a board where they put it into an 11. Folks who haven't been through an 11 before, you know, there's a, you know, they have a negative perspective on that. They don't realize all of the good things that can come out of a truly efficient and productive restructuring, and they don't want to be associated with it. So for all the good and the bad reasons, lots and lots of directors are in denial, and that prevents a whole bunch of robust conversation and discussion in the boardroom, and it slows the timeline down, frankly. It slows us down from hiring the right advisors, having those advisors come in and talk to us early and often about our fiduciary obligations, helping management through the denial and the anxiety that they're experiencing, and helping them understand how to plan 20 steps ahead. So, you know, I'll let the other panelists talk, but I do feel like the very first thing, and particularly as advisors or folks that are looking at a company from the outside in and wondering why they're not doing more than they are, is it's because of this psychological chilling that happens in the boardroom, because folks just aren't experienced in the area, and they just don't want to acknowledge that it's coming.
What are some of the tips that you've learned in how an independent director may deal with the legacy directors who are in denial? Or, you know, in a slightly different context, how does a special committee deal with the other directors when you have this looming trouble and there is a sense of denial?
I mean, you hit it on the head perfectly, right? I mean, the very first thing to do if you have legacy directors, but there are restructuring experienced directors, is to form a special committee, you know, so that committee can be the laboring oar, in part for efficiency and productivity, but in part because most of those legacy directors just don't want to hear about it all the time, every day, the way that the folks on the special committee are willing to lean into it. You know, and also make sure that when you're drafting that special committee charter, that you give as broad authority as you possibly can, whether within the comfort level of the rest of the board and management, or, you know, whether within the confines of the law. Give that special committee as much authority as you possibly can in that charter to make big decisions, and just mandate that the committee update the board on a whatever regular basis, just so they can keep the board informed. But they can go ahead and do that everyday work, meat and potatoes work that, by the way, normally, I mean, Stephanie, you said at the beginning, normally isn't the work of the board. We're normally supposed to be head in, fingers out. But when you get into this zone, we have to do a lot more day-to-day work, because we want to let management continue to run the company and do their thing, and then we're focused on dealing with the advisors. So, yeah. Just as a board member, we see money out when we think we have to retain advisors for something that may or may not, you know, happen. And so
I'm a bargain
I
at
think,
$1,300.
oh, wow. Things have changed since I was a partner at my law firm. But so it's also really important for an advisor like you to come in and say, well, first and foremost, let's look at the D&O coverage. Let's put all of your minds at ease, because we haven't even begun to hit, you know, whatever the stack is but you have hit your deductible or, God forbid, your SIR or whatever, and so that can start paying out right away, and, here's all the different, things that are covered by your D&O, so that the board feels a bit more taken care of, at least with respect to immediate cash out. And also, you don't represent the CEO and the rest of management, right? Because at some point when you guys come in, and it happens to all of us board members as well, we start getting hit in the face with snowballs where, CEO is coming out, I don't know if I'm really going to want to stick around for this, and I don't know if my people are going to want to stick around for this, and oh my gosh, once this hits, everyone's going to want to flee. We have to create some incentive bonus plan, And of course you do. That's the reality of it, but the hands out start coming early and often, and the board needs to be properly advised on how to look at what the CEO is asking for on those plans versus what's truly necessary or desirable, and what's the best way to roll it out, and what's the best way to communicate. So that's something that you want to start to look at. You want to advise the board to start to look at pretty early as well.
Well, you've just touched on something that I'd like to follow up on, which is, do you want the CEO to stay around? So what are some of the considerations that you look at when evaluating what your team is going to be, and particularly, let's start with the senior management team?
Yeah, as everyone knows, the first number 1 through number 10 most important job of a board of directors is hire and fire the CEO. Aside from your basic fiduciary obligations, of course, you're hiring and firing the CEO. And in healthy times, that's truly what you're really always looking at behind the scenes, is great succession planning. So if you're the board, if you're a great platinum level board, this is already sitting somewhere in your succession plan anyway. What if we go into a liquidity crisis? What if we have to do a restructuring? What then? Do we leave this person in place? Is there somebody else that we bring in? Have we been grooming somebody from below that we're developing to step in if that happens? What if this person just ups and leaves because she doesn't want to be around during an 11, doesn't want to be attached to that, gets an offer that's much more tempting for her to leave in the meantime, all of that. So you should, theoretically, as a good board, you should already have thought about this in your scenario planning at some point, but look, once you're there and you've got to make that decision, it's obviously first and foremost, has this CEO been through this before? Because just because you can keep your powder dry and you can get through stuff, with grace, doesn't mean that you're the right person for this super tough period of leadership that's about to happen. So,
And the
yeah.
CFO too.
And the CFO, my God, so many, we could have a whole panel on how critical that is in this context, right? I can only speak as a former CEO, so, but has the person been through it before? Even if they haven't been through it before, are they so embedded in the culture and the DNA of the company? Are they such a leader to the people that it would create even more crisis and more attrition if you parted ways with that person or didn't manage to retain them? So even if they're not particularly experienced in this area and you feel like they can keep their head on their shoulders straight, you might want to keep them just for that reason and then bring in a CRO who actually is doing the day-to-day restructuring work, and the current sitting CEO is managing culture and continuing to operate the business. How is the CEO dealing with the board? Do you feel like the CEO was honest and transparent with you leading up to this finally getting to the board's awareness that you're in trouble and you're going to have to go through whatever process this is? Were they forcing the board to look at things with rose-colored lenses? Were they being fully honest the whole way? Were you surprised as a board member? Is there a good trust level there? Is the CEO all of a sudden becoming hostile because you're bringing in all these other advisors and they feel like they're being usurped, in terms of what's in their lane? So there's all sorts of dynamics that and more than that, 15 things more than that. But for me also, you want to take a look at what it is you're about to go through. If you feel like you're going to have to beautify this company and sell it through the process, then is this person the right salesperson for that gig? That's a big one. How do you put lipstick on a pig or whatever, Is this person going to be great at that? Are they going to be great at figuring out, to the earlier points that we made about, retention bonus programs or whatever you want to call those, are they going to be great at assessing who do we really need to keep around for this phase in the company's lifeline or lifespan? who do we not mind losing? Who else do we need to bring in? Are they good at assembling and reassembling and recharacterizing their team? So you want to take a look at those things.
And I think
Back to the earlier point that you made about when you're working in particular with a founder CEO, I don't know how you guys can tell already, I use very blunt language, so I want to say this more elegantly, but I can't figure out how. I mean, founder CEOs, they have a lot of their ego invested in the company as well, and so a lot of times it's, okay, we're totally vertically integrated, we manufacture everything ourselves, we never outsource, and so they've got all these great facilities all over the place, or they have opened tons and tons of brick and mortar locations because they really love walking into Midtown and seeing one of their stores right there, as the gemstone in a building or what have you. And to your point, that's the other thing that's difficult, I think, for founder CEOs in particular, is taking their ego off the table and allowing some of those things closing some of those facilities, reducing force in those ways, allowing some of those things to close, getting out of some of those leases, and maybe not seeing your billboards everywhere like you're used to seeing.
Right.
Obviously, you need more than just the management team in this kind of situation. You're also looking at counsel and other professional advisors. How should those be chosen? Do you have any tips or really any pitfalls in terms of selecting professionals? Maybe, I don't know whether you want to start with counsel or whether you'd rather start with the FAs, but...
Crisis communication.
Crisis communication.
Your basic meat and potatoes. I mean, everybody knows in this room knows this. Your basic meat and potatoes. PR firm is probably not the right firm to handle this next part of the company's lifespan. So, and you want to get ahead of it so early, as you guys all know. And it's not just about external PR or IR in the case of a public company. It's it's putting your oxygen mask on yourself before you save the kid next to you, right? It's talking to your folks on the inside of the four walls of your company and telling them as early as you possibly can. Again, public company makes it a little bit more difficult, but telling them as early as you can what's going on, keeping them very fully informed as much as you can, updating them, and including them as a part of the process, so they don't just feel like there's a black box that is the boardroom or the C-suite, and we're just cogs in a wheel. We're just doing what we're told, but we're not really part of the future of this company. And that's when people leave, and no matter what kind of dollars you throw at them. So it's about getting with a crisis communications firm pretty early, and they can lead you through talking points for internal communications first. And that even helps later. I mean, things always leak in this day and age, and you can really help with what gets leaked and how that gets leaked and managing those leaks when they happen, and even just activating your own folks to be great communicators out there to the extent possible when they feel like they're a part of the process and they know what's going on. And again, they don't feel like the boardroom or the C-suite is a black box, then they'll want to go out there and willingly defend the company when there's rumors of, they're shutting down, they're filing, they're going away, or whatever. They'll want to go out there and defend the company and talk about it nicely on social media even. That's really important. The people are the folks that are, I don't want to say it's your most valuable asset, because people, that's not the right way to say it, but people are the most valuable thing that you have going for you if you're a company in distress. And they're the folks that you can deputize the easiest, more than your advisors, even more than folks in upper management, or just everybody else working at the company.
You make a really good point, and I can say from my personal perspective, oftentimes working with companies that are in distress, that there are some companies and firms that live way beyond what should have been their natural lifespan given their financial condition, and the only reason for that is because of the people. And the people just work harder, work longer, stay in the situation longer, and at the same time, it can go the other way, that you could have something, an enterprise that should be viable just based on what's in black and white, and based on the numbers, but the people will kill it. And the loss of confidence, I think, there is really key.
And I I think there's something to, no matter which advisor we're talking about, whether it's your outside counsel, whether it's your FA, whether it's your banker, whether it's your PR firm. I hate to say this, but finding folks that have actual industry experience is usually a benefit. I know there's a debate on that both ways, and not all industries are the same in this, but in some industries you can skate by if you don't have that, if you don't have expertise in that industry. But most industries have terms of art, concepts, ways we make money, ways we make, good money versus bad. I mean, and nobody wants to have to explain to their advisor what these various terms mean, or this is why our financials look like this. This is why why we account for this in this particular way. Nobody wants to see terms used inaccurately on decks that are being presented, in particular to the board, because most of us are experts in whatever that industry is, whose board we're sitting on. So I think just to reduce learning curve time and expense, you'd want to look for someone that's got deep industry experience, especially a banker, by the way, because then they've got that whole platinum network when they're going out and shopping your company. This outside counsel is in all likelihood going to take over as acting corporate secretary in the boardroom, because it's going to get real important to document all the meetings that you're having, whether it's full board meetings, special committee meetings, other committee meetings, how those, not just that you had those meetings, but what was talked about in those meetings, what's the style of minutes that we're going to have to memorialize what happened, showing that we broke for appropriate executive sessions, always very important from a governance perspective, and you're going to want deep expertise from your bankruptcy counsel in terms of reflecting all of that properly, not just for the bankruptcy judge, to the extent that the bankruptcy judge is going to take a look at it because something's contested, but to the extent you've got other litigation that, continues to move forward in or out, whatever it is, you are absolutely going to want to have the right lawyers taking those minutes, and it might, and again, it's probably not going to be the current chief legal officer either, because odds are the current chief legal officer doesn't have this expertise. And you want that bankruptcy counsel to cooperate fully with just regular outside counsel so that they get all the nuances that the general outside counsel has been picking up on for the decades they've been representing the company in those minutes. And bankruptcy lawyers, I feel like more than almost any other kind of lawyer, deals with the board of directors, just bringing it back to this panel, deals with the board of directors a whole bunch. I mean, bankruptcy lawyers are really lucky in that, because there's so much business you can develop later on for all sorts of, developing those relationships. But so that's good, in terms of just development of future business, but bad because lots of us are real cranky. And, and we're up here, we're used to, and so we don't, I'm a recovering lawyer, so I like working with lawyers, but lots of board members aren't, and they don't understand why, oh my God, why at every board meeting we're having why are the lawyers here? How much is this costing us? Why do they need to be here? So you need to deal with all of that, and that takes not just the lawyers, but also the other advisors, the FA, the CRO, whatever it is, saying, no, this is normal in a situation like this, and you absolutely want them and need them in this room right now. First, you got to see if there's any policy that covers, whether it's D&O or any other policy. I mean, you always look to insurance first, I always try to lean on the regular outside counsel too, to, you guys, you want an ongoing relationship with us when this is over, or, when we pull it through, or with the rest of us if we end up scattering off. So please, do what you can in terms of teaching these new set of lawyers coming in. They're not replacing you, they're just adding on to what you're doing. So please do what you can in terms of not overbilling us for teaching these folks what the institutional history is in terms of representing this company and bringing them into the fold and helping them be efficient right up at the top. So I try to do that. But I mean, the CFO is, like, to your point earlier, the CFO, super duper important in situations like this and in every situation, but you're always going to have tense conversations with the CFO who'd rather be dumping that money back into the operation of the company than to outside advisors.
While we're on the subject of segueing from outside counsel, there's also inside counsel. You would have a chief legal officer typically or general counsel. It goes without saying, I think the board also has some power over whether that person stays or goes. What are your expectations as a board member of the chief legal officer or the GC?
First and foremost, to keep those costs in line that you're talking about, right? I mean, they need to be...
Beat up on your outside counsel.
Beat up on outside counsel, yeah, exactly. Keep the board fully informed. I mean, I'm just talking as a board member here. I can't speak as anything else, but just keep the board fully informed and remind everyone that communications now more than ever must be privileged, or you must try to protect the privilege as much as you can. So please, either copy the CLO or outside counsel, whatever you feel. If you don't feel appropriate copying the CLO, copy outside counsel, whatever it is. So I guess second is just those admonitions about the privilege and, other concepts of confidentiality that you want people to constantly remember. And then I think third is, just having that constant communication with in particular the CEO, but also the CFO about just reminding them, because they're going to be so head down, frazzled 24/7, just reminding them to maintain their communication channel with the board. Because the last thing you want in a situation like this is your board turning on you as a management team because they felt like you weren't communicating with them, you were running away with issues and doing things before you came back to the board for proper approvals or even just appropriate approvals, even if not actually required. And the last thing you want is the board getting freaked out or pissy because you didn't come back to them and talk to them enough. And it's a really easy concept, but people forget about it because we're human and we get busy. So I do look to the CLO in situations like this to be the person who's going to remind everyone to come back to the board.